And welcome back. We are studying the last chapter of the Gospel of John, and with us is Dr. John Pauline to help us with this Bible study. So, Dr. Pauline, now they catch 153 fish. And so what does Jesus do next? What does he tell them after they catch all these fish?
He says, bring them over here. Mm-hmm. He adds them to the breakfast. So Jesus evidently had been fishing too, and I guess you could tell me if I want to be more like Jesus, I should maybe get into fishing also, because clearly he was able and willing to do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, Jesus fixes breakfast over a fire that he had going by the beach, and it was a privilege to visit what's likely to have been that spot a couple of times. And it seems to have been kind of a quiet breakfast. Let's read verses 12 to 13.
Jesus said to them, "Come and eat breakfast." Yet none of the disciples dare ask him, "Who are you?" knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish.
Mm-hmm. So it seems to have been kind of a quiet breakfast. You know, they're kind of like, okay, what's going on here? And don't know quite how to relate to it.
So they know it's the Lord, but they just don't want to ask.
They don't really know how to relate to him now. Something is different, and they capture that. Interestingly, the language here in the original is the language of the Lord's Supper. He came, he took the bread, he distributed to them, did the same with the fish. So it's kind of a bread and fish communion almost. And it's part of John's practice of putting the Lord's Supper in other places than in chapter 13 where you would expect it. And the Lord's Supper appears at a wedding, at a picnic lunch, and a picnic breakfast. So it's reminding us to keep Jesus in mind in the everyday things of life. Moving on, verses 14 and 15.
This is now the third time Jesus showed himself to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?" He said to him.
Hang on there.
Okay.
Yeah. There's something you're not going to see in English here.
Mm-hmm.
But the word, "do you love me more than these?" In the Greek, it's one of those rare places where the masculine and the neuter are the same. So you can't tell just by looking at these whether it's masculine or neuter. Now, what does that matter? If it's masculine, Jesus is saying to Peter, "Do you love me more than the other disciples?" And that's believable because Jesus does seem to have the disease, Peter seems to have the disease of comparison. He likes to compare himself with the Lord, I will follow you even though everybody else leaves you behind. I love you more than anybody else. Well, what about him following us on the beach? What's going to happen with him? So he's constantly comparing. So it could be Jesus is saying to him, do you really love me more than these disciples? As if to invite him to say, well, Lord, I was a little over the top there. In which case, the silence of Peter to that question would be a confession. Yeah, okay. But the neuter would be interesting. Do you love me more than these? And that would be the boats, the nets, maybe even the fish. In other words, are you committed to the mission, Peter? Are you going to go back to business as usual? Or are you going to make me and the mission here the center of your life? So it isn't clear from the Greek itself whether he's referring to the disciples, do you love me more than these? Or do you love me more than the fishing tackle and all the rest of what's going on here? So it's interesting how in the English language, where we don't even think about such things, people have just assumed, do you love me more than the other disciples? And that may be what he's saying.
Yeah.
But it isn't 100% clear in the original.
Right. And whatever the Greek word would apply to, it seems that the question, whatever, do you love me more than these? I think even for us, if we were to answer that, there should be nothing that we love more than Jesus.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is, or whoever it is. Mm-hmm. So then, can I keep reading verse 15?
Why don't you read 15 through 17?
He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my sheep," or my lambs. He said to him, Again, a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, Tend my sheep. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my sheep.
Now, the word love takes on many roles in the English language. You know, I love my wife. I love Jesus. I love pizza. I love France. You know, you can say love about many different things. In the Greek language, there are different words for love. There are actually 4 different kinds of love in the Greek. One of these is self-sacrificing love, what we've learned to know as agape. A second is phileo. It's in Philadelphia. It means the love of a brother, the love of family type of love, friendship and family. Then there's eros, and that is erotic love, sexual love. And then there's storge, which is affection that, you know, would be appropriate to animals or acquaintances and things like that. So the New Testament doesn't use all of these words, but 2 of them are in this passage. And you can't tell from the English which one is being used. But scholars have noted that Jesus starts out saying, Peter, do you agape me? And Peter responds, Yes, Lord, I phileo you. In other words, do you love me with self-sacrificing love? And Peter says, Of course, Lord, I love you like a friend. And then Jesus asks again, do you agape me? And Peter says, yeah, I phileo you. And then the third time, Jesus says, do you phileo me? And Peter agrees. It's almost as if Jesus is offering him some slack, that Peter can't quite make it up to the standard of cruciform, self-sacrificial love. But more recently, scholars have looked more carefully at this, and they've determined that in the Gospel of John, these 2 words are used interchangeably. For John, they don't seem to mean different things, but he can use each of them for what the other might signify. So probably we shouldn't make too much of the changes of word, even though I think a lot of people have heard about that because it's been used by many preachers through the years as saying, oh, you know, poor Peter couldn't quite come up to the standard, but you and I, we can agape Jesus, you know. So probably that's not the point. But what the point is Jesus is cutting really deep. I mean, Jesus is not about surface life change. When you say do you love me? And the person responds, really, do you love me? Listen, I got to ask you one more time. Do you love me? I mean, Peter's kind of like, come on, you know, what else can I say? What else? I know I messed up, but Lord, please, you know. And Jesus is just boring deep down into his heart and into his soul. And he's not satisfied with shallow surface type of following. And instead, he invites Peter to go truly, truly deep, to deal with the sin in his life and to truly commit to him.
So that third time that Jesus asks Peter, Peter, do you phileo me? How did Peter respond the third time? Yes, Lord, I phileo you again.
Yes, he responds.
So he never
and
changed.
He agrees with them. So he never changes, yeah. Is that significant or is it not? That's the debate. Probably it isn't. Why don't we go on to verse 20 and 21 where Peter betrays the disease of comparison again.
Then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who also had leaned on his breast at the supper and said, Lord, who is the one who betrays you? Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, But Lord, what about this man?
So Peter here is still, you know, comparing. But I think what Jesus is saying here is, look, you know, Peter would like to be the head of the church, you know, the big guy. And John is also going to play a significant role. And Jesus is saying to Peter, he's not your concern. He's not in your jurisdiction. So Jesus is pulling back from the idea that there's one dictator, head of the church, and so on. The church is to have multitude of leaders. In a multitude of counselors, there's safety. And then in the very next, the rumor, in verses 21 to 23, it gets into the rumor that John would live to see Jesus come, and he uses that to dispel this rumor. And then let's go to the very last two verses of the gospel.
This is the disciple who testifies of these things and wrote these things. And we know that his testimony is true. And there are also many other things that Jesus did, which if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Amen.
Well, it's time to go to the conclusion, but before we do, just one little extra thought. The disciples catch a lot of fish, and those are directed by Jesus, but they're connected to the disciples. If this is a parable of the church in the second generation, who are the fish that Jesus caught? And some have suggested maybe those fish represent some people that Jesus takes directly, that never actually joined the church on this earth, but they still belong to Jesus. Maybe Muslims, Hindus, who knows? That there are others as well who become connected to Jesus in other ways than through the church. Just something to think about.
Yeah.
But here in the conclusion, we see that there's abundant number of gospels could be written. And John has been validated as one of the true gospel writers. However, the gospel that matters the most is the one that Jesus will write on your heart. Your gospel is the testimony of the words that Jesus left behind in these gospels in your life and its transforming effect. So, there's no end to the books that could be written about Jesus. But the key is this: our account of the Gospel of John is coming to an end. The story of Jesus' impact on your life is only beginning.
You know, Dr. Pauline, I think that the Gospel of John is now my favorite gospel.
Good for you.
God bless, friends. Till next time.